Good morning. It's Saturday, December 24th, 2016, Christmas Eve, as well as the first day of Hanukkah, which begins this evening. And in the headlines on today's Washington Journal, a vote yesterday by the UN Security Council demanding that Israel stop expansions of Jewish settlements in Palestinian territories has caused a rift between the Obama administration and President-elect Donald Trump. The United States abstained from the vote, a departure from tradition which has seen the United States veto such UN resolutions. The abstention, which allowed the measure to pass, was met with criticism by Israeli President Benjamin Netanyahu and President-elect Trump, who tweeted that things will be different in his administration. So today we're taking your calls on the UN's vote to criticize the expansion of Jewish settlements in Palestinian territories. Tell us what your views are. Republicans can call 202-748-8001. Democrats can call 202-748-8000. Independents can call 202-748-8002. You can also reach us on social media, on Twitter at C-SPAN-WJ and on Facebook at facebook.com/C-SPAN. And good morning. Let's take a look at what U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Susan Power, had to say about yesterday's vote.
Because there are important issues that are not sufficiently addressed in this resolution, and because the United States does not agree with every word in this text, that the United States did not vote in favor of the resolution. But it is because this resolution reflects the facts on the ground and is consistent with U.S. policy across Republican and Democratic administrations throughout the history of the State of Israel that the United States did not veto it.
And more on yesterday's vote from the Washington Post today. It says that the UN Security Council on Friday passed a resolution demanding that Israel cease Jewish settlement activity on Palestinian territory in a unanimous vote that passed when the United States abstained rather than using its veto as it has reliably done in the past. The resolution declares settlements constructed on land Israel has occupied since the 1967 war, including in East Jerusalem, to have, quote, no legal validity, end quote. It said settlements threaten the viability of the two-state solution, and it urged Israelis and Palestinians to return to negotiations that will lead to two independent nations. A little bit more on the decision by the Obama administration to abstain from that vote. Continuing from the Post, the administration's move defied Donald Trump's call on Thursday for the United States to veto the resolution. The incoming Trump administration has signaled that there will be a shift in U.S. policy toward Israel, a point that the president-elect hammered home about an hour after Friday's vote when he tweeted, quote, as to the UN, things will be different after January 20th. And we are taking your calls on the UN vote. Republicans can call 202-748-8001. Democrats 202-748-8000. Independents 202-748-8002 on that. A little bit more on that issue today from the New York Times. It details the ongoing relationship and which is sometimes difficult between President Obama and Benjamin Netanyahu, pointing out that this is a final clash in a relationship that never clicked, according to the Times report. It says Mr. Obama's decision Friday not to block a United Nations Security Council resolution condemning Israeli settlements laid bare all the grievances the two men have nursed since shortly after they took office in 2009. For Mr. Netanyahu, it was the final betrayal by a president who was supposed to be an ally but never really was. For Mr. Obama, it was the inevitable result of Mr. Netanyahu's own stubborn defiance of international concerns with his policies. The two sides did little to hide their mutual contempt after talks led them to conclude that Mr. Obama would not veto the resolution. As presidents of both parties have done in the past, Israeli officials essentially washed their hands of the incumbent and contacted his successor in the wings. President-elect Donald J. Trump promptly put out statements calling on Mr. Obama to veto the resolution. We have James calling in from Santa Fe, Texas on our Democratic line. Good morning, James.
Good morning. I think that this thing with Israel has been going back for years and years and years. You know, other presidents have tried to get these people to talk, and it seems to me like the Israelis are a little bit over. I mean, I know that they want to bring their people into the country, but it seems like to me that it'd be like Mexico coming into the United States and people here letting them come in with nothing. You know, they just come in and take our land. And I feel that the Palestinians are right on the way that they feel, but the Israelis are kind of right on the way that they feel too. But this new Mr. Trump is a fool. He's probably going to get the United States with all this nuclear talk he's talking about, and the way he treats people. That you know we're going to have problems with this person in office.
Well, James, let me ask you this: President-elect Trump's position is the same as has been the position of presidents of both parties in recent years on this. Do you think that in this case, perhaps the administration maybe should have considered that approach rather than abstaining?
Well, it just, you know, there's got to be cooler heads on this. Netanyahu and Trump ought to make a good pair, because I think they're both people that nobody says no to. And Trump especially, I don't really understand the people that voted for this man. He's got no common sense.
Okay. Jim is calling in from Fort Lauderdale, Florida on our Republican line. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning. As a Republican, I would like to thank Barack Obama for this vote, because with this vote, he pretty much blew up the Democratic Party for who knows how long. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz knows it. Has anybody seen the statement that Debbie Wasserman Schultz has made? It's really a very violent statement against Barack Obama's decision to do this. But I would like to remind everybody of one thing. For years, I thought that the Israelis were the biggest problem with the settlement in that area. But people forget that years ago, the Israelis gave the Gaza Palestinians autonomy. And what did they do? They elected Hamas as their government, and there hasn't been an election since then. So this to me, and it should have been to the whole world, this is a precursor as to what would happen if the Israelis settled in the way that the rest of the world seems to think they want them to. Israel gave the two-state solution a trial run, and the Palestinians elected terrorists for their government, and they continued to blow up Israel until they built that great big wall that everybody hates.
Well, Jim, let me ask you this. What about the idea that there can only be one president at a time? Do you think that it's problematic that Mr. Trump is making his views on this and so many other areas so vocal at this time, rather than letting the Obama administration continue until its end?
Barack Obama is a coward. Trump is not a coward. And that's really what this points out. Barack Obama is over in Hawaii, and he's saying that he didn't have anything to do with this, and he pretty much blew up the chances for a settlement over there. So that's really what I see. I don't know what anybody else sees, but what I see is Barack Obama is unable to convince people to his way of thinking. He doesn't want to take the time to do it. So what does he do? He does a cowardly thing. He takes out his pen and writes off all these presidential resolutions that are probably going to be undone. The man's a coward. He was ineffective. I'm done with him.
All right, Tommy's calling in from Milan, Tennessee on our independent line. Tommy, what do you think about the UN resolution vote?
Well, excuse me. I think that it's a sad day in America. I think Mr. Obama perhaps made his most poignant and most remembered pardon when he pardoned the PLO, Hamas, and everybody else who wants to see the destruction of Israel. The PLO, in my opinion, was pardoned for what they had done down through the years to the people of Israel and to their own people. The Palestinian people are good people. They're honest, hardworking people who have been basically manipulated by a political system that has no regard for anybody but themselves. They don't even like the Palestinian people they supposedly represent. And I think it's a sad day in America, and it shows that Mr. Obama could even pardon a terrorist organization like the PLO. Thank you very much, and happy holidays to you all.
All right. Lydia is calling in from Upper Marlboro, Maryland on our Democratic line. Good morning, Lydia.
Good morning. I think it's about time that the United States stand up to Israel. We give them $1 billion a year in financial and military assistance, and we have asked them over the years one thing: to promote a two-state solution and to finally have a peace settlement in the Middle East. And that's to stop building settlements on occupied territory. And they thumb their nose at us. And Benjamin Netanyahu is the worst. He came here last year and spoke in the House, was invited by John Boehner, didn't even tell the president, and he lobbied against the Iran nuclear deal. So it's about time. They are building settlements, so eventually they're going to say, oops, there's not enough land for a two-state solution. Israel is not interested in a two-state solution. They are not interested in peace. The Palestinians were there when the state of Israel was created in 1948.
Well, Lydia, let me ask you this: other past presidents have vetoed this measure, and is it a concern now that the alliance between Israel and the United States may be damaged by this decision?
Well, it's already been damaged by the action of Benjamin Netanyahu. He don't like President Obama, and I think the feeling is mutual. But I think the final straw this time was he called Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a private citizen until January the 20th when he takes the oath of office. Then he had the nerve and the gall to call President Obama and tell him he should veto the resolution. Who is he to tell? We only have one president at a time. And I think Donald Trump overstepped his bounds, and so did Benjamin Netanyahu. Thank you.
Okay. Some reaction from yesterday's vote at the UN Security Council. One from New York Senator Chuck Schumer, who tweeted, "Extremely frustrating, disappointing, and confounding that the administration has failed to veto the UN resolution." Also a tweet from House Speaker Paul Ryan. He tweeted, "Today's vote at the UN sets a dangerous precedent for further efforts to isolate and demonize Israel." Mark's calling from Newcastle, Pennsylvania on our independent line. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning. I applaud this decision. It's about time. I hope it's not too late. I'm proud of our president for at least acting now. I'd like to correct a couple things that I've heard. First of all, as far as being a break with U.S. policy, yes, it is a break with the policy of issuing the veto votes, but it's not really a break with U.S. position regarding the settlements. We've always acknowledged that they were illegal. We've always acknowledged that they're destructive in regard to the peace efforts that I think largely or primarily for political reasons, we've been vetoing these UN resolutions. I'd also like to correct the previous caller who stated that Gaza was given autonomy. I believe it was 2005 or whatever. That's a bit of a joke. Yes, they were given autonomy, but they were also surrounded, and they were not allowed to export. They were not allowed to import basic supplies into Gaza. They were only allowed to fish just a couple miles out the shore of the Mediterranean. So it was kind of a false autonomy. But I think this is great. I just hope that our incoming president builds on this and does the right thing. It's not encouraging what we're hearing from him right now, but Trump he's a deal maker, and he might just be positioning himself to where he might be able to do the right thing in the future.
Okay, a little bit more on the timeline leading up to yesterday's UN Security Council vote from the Wall Street Journal. It says that Israeli officials said they were spooked by a December 4th speech Secretary of State John Kerry gave in Washington, where he sharply criticized Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's settlement policy. Mr. Kerry then held meetings with the Palestinians' lead negotiator, Saeb Erekat, on December 12th to discuss the peace process. It says a senior Israeli official said its government got wind that Mr. Kerry conveyed to a Palestinian diplomat that at the meeting that the U.S. was likely to abstain from the UN resolution. It says later on here, this Wall Street Journal piece, word of the U.S. abstention created panic in Israel. Mr. Netanyahu held emergency meetings among his senior aides. He talked with Mr. Kerry on Thursday morning. Israeli officials said they warned the U.S. that they would seek Mr. Trump's support in blocking the resolution if the Obama administration didn't act. When no guarantee was offered, the Israelis began reaching out to senior leaders in the Trump transition team. And there's a little timeline about things leading up to yesterday's vote and the Israeli officials talking to members of the Trump transition team. Mary's calling in from Potomac, Maryland on our Republican line. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning. I would say that everybody who calls in to criticize this vote is obviously morally bankrupt. Our senators kowtow to Israel because they are scared of the Israeli lobby and the damage they can do, and because they have been able to overthrow senators in elections. This vote was a very morally courageous vote, something that should have been done years and years ago. And it's not, Paul Ryan called it shameless, but I think Paul Ryan is shameless. And this was a decent thing to do, and I applaud the president for taking this bold step and showing the world that Israel does not dictate our foreign policy, and that we stand for decency and honesty, and we intervene when it's necessary on sides that other people may not like. That, I mean, the Palestinians. But they...
Well, Mary, let me ask you this. Some criticize the move, saying that it makes it harder to obtain Mideast peace, or even open discussions about a two-state solution when you have this antagonism between the U.S. and Israel. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't, because the two-state solution has been talked about for years and years, and all along America has gone along with in favor of Israel. And what has happened? Nothing. Nothing has happened. So now it's time to take the bold move and the honest thing to do. And I'm very proud of this vote, and I like I said, it was done in a very, it was the right thing to do for this.
Okay, and a little bit more about the reaction from Prime Minister Netanyahu. According to Reuters, it says, quote, Israel rejects this shameful anti-Israel resolution at the UN and will not abide by its terms. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has encouraged the expansion of Jewish settlements in territory captured by Israel in the 1967 war with its Arab neighbors, said in a statement. That's the reaction from Prime Minister Netanyahu as we discuss yesterday's UN Security Council vote. Lisa is calling in from Laurel, Maryland on our Democratic line. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning. I couldn't be more proud of the two Maryland callers, one Republican and one Democrat. I think this resolution was exactly what we should have done to abstain. Those who call and say that Barack Obama is weak, no, on the contrary. He's quite strong, standing up to Israel and not being afraid of the Jewish lobby, not being afraid of Donald Trump calling him, which was totally out of bounds and disrespectful of his office. He should be sitting on the sidelines waiting for his turn if he, in fact, gets it. And those are my comments. I'm so happy the Maryland callers, Democrat and Republican, agree on this issue and stand up to the bully Netanyahu there in Israel. Thank you.
Okay, in today's Washington Post, there is an op-ed from two Middle East experts, Elliot Abrams and Michael Singh, saying that the move by the Obama administration just made Mideast peace a little harder to obtain. They close by saying a U.S. veto of the resolution would not have been an endorsement of settlements. Rather, it would have been an affirmation that this is an issue that can only effectively be addressed through negotiations. The best way to encourage those negotiations is not to prejudge their outcome or set timetables, but to create the right regional conditions for them by countering spoilers such as Iran and the Islamic State, who oppose peaceful coexistence, as well as the right local conditions for them by reinvigorating programs aimed at building confidence through economic and security cooperation. Peace in the Middle East will not be accomplished through a UN vote. Rather, it will require renewed U.S. leadership in the region and the rebuilding of relationships of trust with all our partners there. This is where the next administration should start. John is calling in from Arlington, Virginia on our Republican line. Good morning, John.
Hi. I don't consider the vote, the abstention, either anti-Semitic or anti-Israeli. I certainly considered one more chance to give the two-state policy, which everybody, including Netanyahu, say they support, a chance. The Israelis were right in the 2000s not to agree to further negotiations until violence stopped. On the other hand, the Arabs, the Palestinians, see a creeping taking of land on the West Bank to the point where a state that anybody could consider contiguous, meaning one solid state, looks ridiculous. It looks way more like the apartheid system that the South Africans set up, and it's not good for anybody. So this is a condemning the settlements, and it has to be done that way because Israel has the power to do this, and the Palestinians can't do anything about it, and the peace process is stalled. So I think the president did the right thing. He had the usual suspects voted for the resolution, like Russia and China, but he had important allies like Britain, our best ally, France, and New Zealand vote for the resolution. So it's not exactly a resolution that threatens Israel. It just threatens a policy which provides for increasing expansion and would make a two-state solution impossible, to the point where the Israelis either would have to allow the Palestinians to vote in their elections, or concede that they're running an apartheid system.
Well, John, let me ask you this. What about that last op-ed piece that I read that said if this weakens the ties between U.S. and Israel, it makes the two-state solution even harder to obtain because it's done through negotiations, not through actions of the UN?
That would be okay if there was a freeze on settlements, but the negotiations haven't gotten anywhere. The Israelis are continuing to expand to the point where a legitimate state that could be organized would be impossible. So yeah. But when are those negotiations going to start? When could they end? And at a minimum, if they froze the settlements, then you would have time to do all this. But if the Israeli policy is to continue the settlements, then pushing the peace process off into the far future makes no sense at all, because the Israelis are creating facts on the ground which would be very difficult for them or anybody else to reverse and make a two-state solution really impossible.
Okay. Looking at some of our other headlines today from the Washington Post, Trump's nuclear tweets leaving many unnerved. According to this piece, Donald Trump's sudden embrace this week of a nuclear arms race and his staff scramble to minimize the fallout underscored an emerging modus operandi for the president-elect: governance by chaos. Since winning the election, Trump has seemed to revel in tossing firecrackers in all directions, often using Twitter to offer brief but provocative pronouncements on foreign and domestic policies alike, and leaving it to others to flesh out his true intentions. In the past week, Trump has publicly pitted two military contractors against each other, sowed confusion about the scope of his proposed ban on foreign Muslims, and needled China after its seizure of a U.S. underwater drone, but nothing created more consternation for many foreign policy experts than his assertion Thursday on Twitter that the nation should, quote, greatly strengthen and expand, end quote, its nuclear capability. Van Dellen is calling in from Miami on our independent line. Good morning.
Good morning. I've been just listening to the argument, and what I'm surprised that a lot of people not noticing is that this decision was a unanimous decision by the United Nations. It's not like America alone pushed this thing through. As a matter of fact, America didn't even vote in favor of the whole thing. And it's clear that the Israelis don't intend to stop settlements. And they have been ahead of the time for quite a long while. If my memory serves me right, some years ago, past President Carter was accused of accusing the Israeli having a sort of apartheid system in Israel. So Israel have been doing all they want as long as they want. And apparently Israeli demands for housing, because people coming from all over the world coming to Israel to make a Jewish state. And they need the land. But they can't do things like that. The world needs to step down, not only voting in the United Nations, but started boycotting Israel until they come to some peaceful agreement with the Palestinians. We don't want war and killing and a lot of catastrophe. But unless the world put its foot down and say, listen, now, enough is enough. You guys have to come to the table and decide on what you really want. Do you want a two-state situation, or do you want to challenge a living as one state together? The war, the understanding must stop now. It's time for something to be done.
Okay, let's take a look at some other reaction from lawmakers to yesterday's UN vote. Congressman Jim Jordan tweeted, "I condemn in the strongest terms the UN Security Council vote today. I stand with our great friend Israel in opposition to this resolution." We also have a tweet from Congressman Scott Peters. He tweeted his statement on the Security Council vote. He essentially is chiming in on this as well. We have Randall calling in from Stephenville, Texas on our independent line. Good morning, Randall.
Hi. Thank you for allowing me to be a guest on your show. Your first caller that I listened to from Arlington Virginia, was well informed, up to date minute. But I go back to 1948, and I worked for Colonel Jacob Harvey, who was a lawyer in Chicago. He got the brand of colonel in the military when World War II was going on. His parents were Russian Orthodox Jews. He wrote the Chicago-Israel bonds. He is the fellow in the Democratic network that fixed Chicago and fixed a few farm belts, he would tell you, a few farm boxes out to the south, and told Harry Truman, Mr. Truman, we believe that with the help of the great people of Chicago and a few farmers out to the south, we can return you to the Oval Office. So first thing, the reply from the American people to Netanyahu on his last offensive toward us, he is way out of line. Secondly, I look at what's going on currently as perhaps a mother would. You know, there's the mothers in black over there. 200,000 of them have marched in Jerusalem at one time. No news coverage. No news coverage. I'm well up to date with the brainwashing that the Israeli people set out, the Israeli government set out to have the network news and the cable news done. I believe it began back in 91 or 2. But the thing you need to know about the Arlington reply, the fellow from Arlington is real informed and up to date. But here's the matter. In 1968, Mike Wallace of CBS and 60 Minutes interviewed Moshe Dayan. Moshe Dayan told him, he asked him, when are you going to stop? And he said, when we get to the West Bank. So that was cut and dried a long time ago. The Israelis do not want peace. This neocon guy, Netanyahu, he's the last of the neocons off of Karl Rove and George Bush and all that bunch. He's the last guy steadfast. This Trump guy, he's already got us in trouble. They're fixing to hurt our farmers. I shouldn't go there. But anyway, I'd just like to say it was cut and dried a long time ago, and any person that would respect what Israel would do would know that Einstein turned them down for the thing that you are seeing today. Einstein would not be their first president, and I know the locker room talk that he involved. Okay. You'll read what the historians will put in paper for you, but I know the locker room talk he used toward refusing his job.
Okay, let's look a little bit more into what went behind or what was going on behind the scenes with the incoming Trump administration before the UN Security Council's vote yesterday. According to the Wall Street Journal, Mr. Trump and his transition team on Thursday held talks with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and Israeli officials. Egyptian officials originally drafted the resolution, but after the conversation between Mr. Trump and Sisi, Egypt pulled the resolution from consideration a few hours before it was scheduled to vote. The move infuriated U.S. and European diplomats who saw the decision as the result of interference by Mr. Trump after Egypt's withdrawal. Friday's resolution was co-sponsored by New Zealand, Malaysia, Venezuela, and Senegal. Kathleen's calling in from Riverside, Ohio on our Democratic line. Kathleen, what do you think about the UN Security Council vote and the U.S.'s abstention?
I think it was an excellent choice by President Obama, and as many other callers have said, it's about time. I mean, if other presidents had stood up to Israel at the UN, I don't think, well, we don't really know whether the settlements would have continued to expand as they have. I know Bush 41 had at one point said President Bush 41 and Baker had said if they continued expanding settlements that our aid to Israel would be halted or, just put a temporary hold on it. And I know that Bush 41 suffered consequences for that public statement. And so the other thing I want to say is that I think really the U.S. in many ways is being Israel's best friend. It's like having a friend who's an addict in some ways, and and you're standing up to Israel saying, look, if you continue to do this, you're doing yourself more harm. If your intention is a two-state, indeed, which many of us and many people on the phones have expressed, if you can say that you're for a two-state solution, there have to be acts that represent that. And for instance, you can't blame Israel in some ways for the wall. However, they built the wall on internationally recognized, or parts of the wall on internationally recognized Palestinian land. And so they can't continue to speak with a forked tongue and say you're for a two-state resolution and yet continue to expand illegal settlements. I want to mention several websites that I think are incredibly informative, although a lot of informed people have been on the phone today. One is called If Americans Knew. Again, If Americans Knew. Another website by Philip Weiss is called Mondo, M-O-N-D-O, Weiss, W-E-I-S-S. Both two incredibly good websites, as well as going and watching Professor Mearsheimer's 7-part series on Israel's future and choices and the consequences of their choices, and Norman Finkelstein, Professor Norman Finkelstein, who has suffered consequences, lost jobs because of speaking the truth about what's really going on. So again, Norman Finkelstein.
Okay. Mitchell's calling in from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, on our Republican line. Good morning, Mitchell.
Yes, good morning. I've been listening to everybody speak. I'm very interested in it. However, you have to understand, when George Bush, the little one, was in the office, the Muslim Brotherhood used to attend the negotiations. Nowadays, the Muslim Brotherhood controls and does everything. So you have to realize who you're talking to, trying to make a grievance, a deal, negotiate, make an grievance. Forget about it. You're dealing with the Muslim Brotherhood. And as far as nuclear weapons go, with whatever the hell Donald Trump said, hey, check it out. You could dial in the new nukes now to 2,000, 3,000 people, and that's it. You find out where the terrorists are, you dial in 2,000, 3,000, boom, you hit them. So, until Israel builds a wall, a new temple, don't worry about the world coming to an end. But just remember who you're dealing with. You're dealing with the Muslim Brotherhood.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, a little bit in some of our other headlines from today's Washington Post. It talks about Vladimir Putin, the Russian President Vladimir Putin, in his end-of-year press conference, giving a message to Democrats saying they should learn to lose with dignity. According to the Post, Russian President Vladimir Putin has a message for the White House and Democratic leaders who accuse him of stealing their candidate's victory. Don't be sore losers. That was how Putin answered a question Friday at his nationally televised annual news conference about whether Russia interfered with the U.S. presidential election to favor Donald Trump. The Democrats, quote, are losing on all fronts and looking elsewhere for things to blame. He told the nearly 1,400 journalists packed into a Moscow convention hall, quote, in my view, this is, how shall I say it, degrades their own dignity. If you have to know how to lose with dignity. President Netanyahu also pointed out that Republicans won both the Senate and the House in the election, adding, "Did we do that too?" He asked with a slight grin. President-elect Donald Trump responded to President Putin's remarks on Twitter, tweeting yesterday, Vladimir Putin said today about Hillary and Dems, quote, in my opinion, it was humiliating. One must be able to lose with dignity, end quote. So true. John's calling in from Kansas City, Missouri on our independent line. John, what do you think about the UN Security Council vote on Israel?
Looks to me like Israel's getting ganged up on again. The Israeli state was made, back in about 1945, 46, something like that. And as a result, because they had been chased out of Europe, the ones that weren't killed by Hitler, and they needed a place to go. Palestine hasn't been a country for several thousand years. And they and the Israelis have been at it for most of that time. So we got to remember that when the Israelis are pushing their weight around, they're trying to get a little bit of real estate between them and all the every one of the countries that surrounds them that are not shy at all about saying they want to just push the Israelis right into the sea. And that's what they're trying to do, and that hasn't changed a bit. So I don't begrudge the Israelis anything. I was growing up during that 7-Day War and everything back in the 60s, and they're due whatever we can support them, I say.
Okay. All right. Awad's calling in from Las Vegas on our independent line. What do you think about the UN Security Council's vote and the U.S.'s abstention?
It's 60 years late. That's the vote on the UN. The Israelis are the terrorists. They're a Russian satellite country that was created by Russia, and they had Truman endorsed before Russia did. Israel does not have that right. Do you want Israel to have a right? Let them have Florida, New York, and California. But, excuse me, they already own those. So Israel is the World War leaders of World War. And that's exactly what's going to happen. World War III is coming in. We have Trump in with his son-in-law, who is an Orthodox Jew, and Jews come from Ireland, not from Ireland. That's where Jews come from. Let them go back to Ireland. They deserve Ireland.
Okay, Doug is calling in from Brookline, Massachusetts, on our Democratic line. Good morning, Doug.
Oh, hi, good morning. Earlier on, you described Elliot Abrams and Michael Singer as experts on the Middle East. They are neither. They are lobbyists for Israeli interests. And I'd like to remind you that Patrick Buchanan once said that the Congress is Israeli-occupied territory. And it's no wonder that Chuck Schumer is upset about this decision, because in this election cycle alone, Chuck Schumer has received over $1 million from Israeli PACs. The level of money that flows into the Congress from Israeli interests is absolutely embarrassing. And the Department of Justice should name AIPAC as AIPAC, the American Israeli Political Affairs Committee, as an agent of a foreign country. That's my remarks, and thank you, and good morning.
Okay. In its opinion pages, the Wall Street Journal reacts to yesterday's U.S. abstention in the UN Security Council vote as Obama's anti-Israel tantrum. It says the decision by the United States to abstain from a UN Security Council resolution condemning Israel over its settlements on the West Bank is one of the most significant defining moments of the Obama presidency. It defines this president's extraordinary ability to transform matters of public policy into personal pique at adversaries. It defines the reality of the international left's implacable opposition to the Israeli state. Earlier this week, Egypt withdrew the Security Council resolution under pressure from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. President-elect Donald Trump also intervened, speaking with Egypt's government and via Twitter urging Mr. Obama to block the resolution, as have past U.S. administrations and Mr. Obama himself in 2011. As was rightly reported Friday, after the UN vote, the White House decided to abstain, thereby allowing the pro-Palestinian resolution to pass in retaliation against the intervention by Mr. Netanyahu and Trump. We have Vita calling in from San Leonardo, California, on our Democratic line. What do you think about yesterday's vote?
I think it's really not that much of a difference, because first of all, we need to stop saying that it's a two-state solution, because Israel has been allowed to build settlements, which is against the UN and the law that has been for international law. And also the other fact is that we need to take a look at our leaders, our political leaders in Congress, the senators and the representatives, because they make a pledge in order for them to stay in office, they have to make a pledge or write something on their page saying that they will support Israel. And that is not patriotic to first putting United States citizens first over a foreign country. I mean, we're not even a country because Israel is not a country. And also the other fact is that there's a great book called The General's Son by Miko, Miko, his last name is Peled. He is Israel, and his father was a general when they first started the war, and how Israel started the war, and also he also was a military in the military for Israel. He writes a great book on how Israel has been wrong in treating the Palestinians, how they been taking their land without any cause. They just go over there and just put the people out. And also Israel, here we give reparations and money to Israel for the Holocaust that happened in a foreign country in Germany, but we won't give reparations to Black Americans for slavery, but we'll give money to Israel for people saying that because they're poor. They only had a Holocaust of no more than 10 years. We were enslaved in Jim Crow over 400 years, and we can't get reparations. Everybody falls apart and goes crazy if Black people ask for reparations. The Chinese got reparations. We still give millions and millions of dollars of taxpayer money to Israel.
Okay. Max is calling in from Los Angeles on our Republican line. Good morning, Max.
Hello. Good morning.
And
the last caller was actually very correct in the stats or in the point about Israel being illegally occupying the West Bank with their territories. Now that goes against the UN Charter. Way back in the day, Israel illegally immigrated into that area when it was Palestine. Palestine was a nation. The caller 2 calls before said it wasn't a nation. It was actual state, and the UK ran that state until they allowed the UN to give Israel a piece of that land for the charter. But aside from that, the vote actually is inconsequential when you really look at it and understand that the United States has basically backed up the international policy in stating that Israel has violated international law with the expansion of the territories and into the Palestinian state, creating confusion and causing ISIS and these other things to happen. And then if we go back into Putin, what he stated today was not, he stated said losers are losers and will make excuses and point the fingers at others in order to blame everyone but themselves. And he said that the Democrats need to look at themselves and what they did wrong. And he also stated that the Russian government does not want a nuclear arms race. They don't want to proliferate an arms race.
Well, Max, let me ask you this to get back to the discussion about the UN Security Council vote. You said that it's largely inconsequential. What do you think needs to happen in order to get to a place where negotiations can continue in the Middle East, or do you think that's possible at all?
The negotiations are continuing. What's going on is you have sour grapes between pro-Israel camps and the propaganda news media trying to promote it as if it's the end of the peace. No, the rule was Israel was supposed to give up that much land to Palestine, and they've been encroaching ever since the 60s. They don't want to follow the rules. They want to act as if they can do what they want to do, and they're using propaganda media in order to present it as if it's some type of affront to the peace. No.
Okay.
Palestine.
Okay. Deborah's calling in from New Jersey on our independent line. Good morning, Deborah.
Hi. I just wanted to weigh in on the issue. First off, I read yesterday about Senator McCain, Senator Lindsey Graham, House of Representative Speaker Paul Ryan, commenting that what was done in the United Nations by abstaining on that vote about Israeli settlements in occupied Palestinian territory, that it was shameful. Quite to the contrary, our political leaders in Congress, that goes for the United States Senate and the House of Representatives, just like the gentleman from Massachusetts said. They've been living with one side of facts. They disregard everything else but the talking points they get from the American-Israeli Political Action Committee, AIPAC. We give billions of dollars of aid, funding to Israel. We've got problems here at home. We turn the other way when they incite violence on a regular basis. They do not want to negotiate. They want to have a one state, and we need a two-state. The Israelis, as a people who are equal in worth to the Palestinians and every other person that lives on the globe, everyone is equal. They're entitled to political, social, and human rights, and I have not seen that. And the Trump administration, for all they say they're going to squash ISIS, they won't be able to squash any ideology because of the blowback of this particular Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which has been going on for years.
Well, Deborah, let me ask you this. Do you think that there's any possibility to get to a two-state solution? Do you think that at the very least, if there's a warmer relationship between the U.S. and Israel, that might aid discussions and negotiations toward a two-state solution?
The problem is the United States is not neutral. The problem is the United States always takes Israel position. And I think for once the Americans have to turn out and unelect the members of Congress that are using our taxpayers to incite this one-sided vantage point. It will never push towards peace with that kind of mentality. And I just believe that what was done in the UN, an abstention vote, was gutsy. I think it was important to send a message. And I'm hoping that Trump, who says he wants to solve the Israeli-Palestinian issue, I hope that the ambassador he's appointing, Mr. Friedman, is going to be disallowed to serve as ambassador. He's even more to the right than Prime Minister Netanyahu. We're all equal, and we do not get anything but blowback for our positions by being so one-sided in our foreign policy. It's about time the American people studied all the facts on both sides and started lobbying our members of Congress or telling them you're unelected. That's all I have.
Okay, Khalid is calling in from Santa Fe, New Mexico on our Democratic line. Good morning.
Good morning.
And what are your thoughts on yesterday's UN Security Council vote?
Though I disagree with Obama's stance on Israeli settlements, I still have confidence in his intelligence and integrity. Trump is a bragging con man who has turned our democracy into a circus, and I doubt his commitment to Israeli security.
Okay. According to the Times of Israel, it says that UN chief says the Security Council resolution on settlement showed, quote, leadership. The piece says the United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said Friday that the anti-settlements resolution passed earlier in the day at the Security Council with a U.S. abstention was, quote, a significant step, end quote, that showed leadership and demonstrated the international community's collective efforts to reconfirm the vision of a two-state solution. Ban also urged Israelis and Palestinians to work toward creating an environment that would allow a return to the negotiating table, and said that the UN would, quote, support all concerned parties on achieving this goal. Quote, the resolution is a significant step demonstrating the Council's much-needed leadership and the international community's collective efforts to reconfirm that the vision of two states is still achievable, Ban said in a statement. Ruth is calling in from Illinois on our independent line. Good morning, Ruth.
Good morning. To all these people, Israel was given, that's the promised land that was given to the Hebrew children by the God of the Holy Bible way back in the New Testament time. God scattered the people because of their letting in other people, and they started worshiping other gods. God scattered the people from Israel, but he left a remnant in Judea. Thus, they became known as Jews. Now, Israel is no bigger than the state of New Hampshire. But God says, I will bless those who bless Israel. I will curse those who curse Israel. Jimmy Carter, which I voted for, he talked to Israel into giving up the Sinai Peninsula for peace. They gave it up. They got no peace. Herbert Walker Bush talked him and a guy from Russia talked Israel into giving up the Gaza Strip. And for peace, they got Hamas. Hamas was put in the Gaza Strip by the Palestinians, of which, by the way, did not exist when God gave Israel to the Hebrew children. And if you stand against Israel, you stand against the God of the Holy Bible. And we got a huge recession when Jimmy Carter did it. We got a huge earthquake in California when Bill Clinton said quit building in the Gaza Strip. Okay. And we got 2 major hurricanes when Herbert Walker Bush talked him into giving up the Gaza Strip.
Okay. Richard's calling in from Louisville, Kentucky, in our Republican line. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning. Barack Hussein Obama will go down as one president who has backed and supported, behind closed doors, Islamic terrorism. Case in point, his push for Keith Ellison, to run the Democratic committee would give terrorists like CAIR and the Muslim Brotherhood, who Keith Ellison took money from, it will give these terrorists a national platform. They will be in charge of the Democrat Party here in the United States of America. Israel will not stand for anything that the United Nations does against them and their people. And I predict that the United Nations will be long gone before Donald Trump leaves office.
Okay. Coming up next, what has been the influence of immigrants on the United States? National Public Radio's Tom Gelton examined their impact over the last 50 years and join us next to discuss it. And later on, our book series continues with Robert Jones, the CEO of the Public Religion Research Institute and the author of The End of White Christian America. But first,